Okay, so let's take a look at the code to see how this is set up. And try to be as quick as possible. I went ahead and kept the original keyline information, and I just rendered it here so that it wouldn't draw the keyline. And it may be obvious the reason for that is because I went with the rounded corner. But if you need to turn it back on, you just need to uncomment this, Command Shift M. And the kiosk line width is set to 20, but to make it really obvious, we'll set this to red. And you'll see where it shows up. So it's still there, uh, big and colorful, but I don't need it. So I just went ahead and shut all this down. Then just do a Command M to shut it down. So if you want to use it for another layout, you could, or if you don't have the rounded corners, you could still use it. Okay, so there's some housekeeping stuff going on in here. The variable canvas is being created to be associated with the main root level of the canvas. And that way, if I need to reference the root level from within a movie clip and or within a function, this is the easiest way to set that up. You can always use the parent option, but this is fairly straightforward. So in here, I've created a variable, arrow alpha. This is what allows me to turn the arrow off and on if I click on the same thing. So for example, if I click on Los Angeles and then I click on Los Angeles again, everything disappears, including the arrow. And the reason why this works is because the arrow now is hooked up to a variable. And so when I click on the same button again, it changes that alpha to 0, so it disappears along with that text box, so everything just kind of fades away. That's the way that's set up. And so that gets established originally over here. The alpha variable is being assigned invisible. That way when the whole animation starts, we don't see the arrow until we need it. And then over here we have the alpha setting. This is set to 0 from here, so we're just taking advantage of the variable for the number for the first time. And then the center map, that would be the box in here, that rather the movie clip. This movie clip in here is it's just getting its reference to wherever it is. And just like last time, if I move this to a new location, let's move this all the way to the top, and I run it, now the arrow is going to be pointing relative to that position, which means it's always going to be pointing up in this particular case. So if I click on New York, it's going to come up. And if I click on San Jose, it's still pointing up. And so if I click on Chicago, it's still pointing up, but never points down the way it had before. And that's because it's getting its reference from this spot. So now if I move it more or less back to where it was, well, actually I'll just do an undo to get it back where it was. And now if I run it, now you'll see that the arrow does rotate. In New York, it's pointing down. Down in San Diego, it's pointing up. So that's the reference, how you get it to turn around. Okay, so, oops, do an F9. Okay, so that's what's going on there. The arrow is being centered. Again, we're using variables to define the location of that center box. So this map center is that crosshairs that you saw. It's sharing its XY positions with the map center variables. Then the variable is being assigned to the X and Y position of the arrow, so it's being relocated. Then we get into defining our arrays with our movie clips. So the first one is the play button, and that's the one that's over here off to the side. These are the play buttons over here, there, and those are there showing up in here. The dots are these right in here. That's the dot layer, and you can see that the instance is also the .mc. Next thing over here is the text box, text MC. That would be these guys over here. You can see that's the text MC, text MC, text MC. They're numbered accordingly. And then over here we have the play back. This is hidden away. It's this option over here. It's this guy right in here. And here we can see that that's the play back. It's the back of the play button. It's the playback art MC, and this one happens to be New York 0. And you can see that that's lined up over here as well. So let me put that back, Command Z. And then underneath here we have the playback layers. Those are all those ones that we just looked at. And then we get into our artwork. And the artwork is pretty straightforward. You can replace it with whatever you want. So let's go back to the code. So once all the movie clips are established, the instance names into arrays, then the next thing that happens is the content. The title are the names of the cities, the headings of the buttons, and the headings of the text boxes are all using the title. Then we've got string variables, which are not, this is not an array, these are individual strings, and they're equal to this line of text over here, which I stole from Wikipedia. So in here, there's a little return n here before it gets to the Wikipedia post, and that gives me a new line, and that's why when I look at these over here, you can see it returns right here after that parentheses. Now, if you wanted to make this a different font or italicize or bold, you would have to do it with a second box. So you'd have your text number 1, text number 2, and text number 3. And that's the easiest way to get the font to change for you, or if you want to make it italicized or some variation. Okay, so anyway, the \n is what allows you to get us a new line. And then down over here on the bottom, we're taking all those string variables and we're piling them into an array that we can then call up as we need it. And then down here on the bottom is where all the setup is being established. And so the handlers are designing the buttons, but all this stuff over here is what's basically taking all this information and parsing it out to the right location. This is a for loop, and it circles 12 times. That would be including 0 through 11. And so the first play button goes inside it. It has a box called text box called subtext 1. The text value is given whatever is an array title, which is the text array information, which is this one over here. So all of that is parsed out to the buttons that are on the left-hand side, the play buttons. And within the text box, there's another subtext number 1, and that's also getting the title, and that's the equivalent of this in here. So this is going to the play box, and then this one over here, this is going to the text box. These two are sharing the same array in terms of how it's distributed. And the next thing is the captions. That just takes the captions and assigns it to the second box inside the text MC movie clip. And then the dot array scale is being set to 1. So what's going on in here is first 1 is the value, and it's being assigned to the scale value of the dot. So it's going to be at 100%. And now since this is 100% too, then that's being assigned to this value. So these two are being assigned 1 all at the same time, and that's the scale. Same thing is going on in here with the text box, the X scale in here and the Y scale. That's also being set to a different size, but this one's made smaller, so it's starting at a smaller size, and it's then becomes bigger. This one starts at the 100%, and it's made bigger later on, and this one's made to 100% later on. Then the text MC is turned invisible, so this is what turns all the boxes invisible. So if we look in here, they're all visible. If we could do command return, that everything got rendered invisible because of that command over here. So this guy over here is what changed it to invisible, the alpha setting. And the dots are also the red dots are being made invisible as well. So both the text boxes and the dots. And then we're getting into the playback. This is the button underneath everything. It's being set to 30% gray across the board, so that's why it's somewhat transparent. And so when the button is clicked, this movie clip then is turned into solid black. And then we get into the event handlers. The first one in here is kind of the master link. That's one function that is programmed to tell the CreateJS what to do. And this one in here is the old arrow application. So if you don't want to see the arrow at all, you can do a double forward here like that. And then we do command return. But the bubble, the red dot is getting bigger. And so if you don't think you need the red arrow, that's the way to, the arrow, rather the yellow arrow, that's the way to get rid of it. So let's turn it back on for now. Okay, and then we get into our function in here. This is the CreateJS handler. And this is kind of set up the way we were working before in the past with that toggle option. It's just a variation of that exercise. So what's happening in here is first the function is being run. There is a bind going on in here, so this knows what button you clicked on, which of the play buttons you clicked on, and then it steals the array address and it assigns it to this number. So if the first one I clicked on is the 0, this then becomes a 0, then I can use that as a reference for other instance names. So then the small in here, this is just so that it's easier to change. It's just a variable that's used on line 65. So we go to 65 in here, this location. Where's the small? Here it is. I guess it changed lines. So that should be on 65. I'll fix that. So that should be 67. So what that does is wherever this changes, this value in here is going to be 0.7, so a little bit over half. CreateJS, it's changing the box information, so it's making it the size increase to 0.7. It's decreasing. So this is just a loop. This is what sets everything back to normal. So the first thing that happens is that if the playback art, that's that underneath the button artwork, is not at 1. Now the reason I did this is because I used to say is if it's at 0.3, but I ran into a math problem where sometimes 0.3 was also 0.001 and it was stopping from running. So the number 1 was a lot more solid, so I just went with the number 1. So it gives me the same effect. So this is looking to see that the alpha is not set to 1. In other words, the alpha is invisible. If it is invisible, then the arrow alpha value is set to 100%. Now, it doesn't set it here. This sets it up so that it'll be animated at 100%. That's what's going on in there. Then everything loops through here, and this gets back this takes the artwork back to its static state, meaning before you click on the button and everything shows up and the black background shows up. This does a reset. And then after resets everything back to the original static position, then this one kicks in and it finds the button that you're on, whatever num you're on. Remember, if we clicked on the 0 one, that 0 information got pulled out and it's being given to these. So then it goes to first the back play button, and it says it's going to be 0. It's going to set the first value over here as the display information. And so rather the delay, so there's going to be no delay. And then it's going to go to the next option, which is the alpha setting, so it's going to become 100% visible. And then we use a couple of nulls to get past the scaling option, so scale in X and Y. We do the null so it doesn't change that. And then we change what we want, how we want the animation to take place. Now this is on the back play. We don't want any kind of bouncing or anything. We just want it just to be a nice straight linear progression from turning from the lighter color to the darker color or vice versa. So this is set up to none. And that's what's going on in there for the ease in. Then in the X and Y position, there's nothing being set there. The reason why these are being thrown in is because eventually we need to get over here to the duration, how long this is going to take. And this is being set for half a second. And so it's going to go fairly fast. And then we get in, and this is how fast the background of that bubble is disappearing or reappearing. Well, actually 300 when it's reappearing. Down here is where it reappears. So anyway, then the next thing that's going to happen, we're generating this thing to appear. The next thing that happens is the dot starts to show up, and notice the time delay. Here the dot is only waiting a second, or rather, yeah, 1 second, and then the text box shows up in 1.5 seconds later. And so this is waiting a full second before it takes off. This is waiting for the arrow to catch up before the dot starts to show up. And by then the arrow should show up. And then after the dot animates, then the text box animates, and that's what's going on there. And it's got that elastic option. That's why it's bouncing back and forth. So the other thing that while we're on the topic of making adjustments to our ease is, in here's a website. Right in here, we'll go ahead and copy that. And I'll just do a command return to call up my browser, and I'll paste the website there. And this is what gives you the examples. So if you want to test something out, you can see what type of animation you have, uh, and see whether it's something that's appropriate for the effect that you're having. And then all you have to do, if you're on Safari, all you have to do is do a right click, and then I'm going to do a Command C for copy, and that puts it into the clipboard. So I'm not going to change it, but I will let you see where it goes. Remember, so I did a right click, and that selected it. Then I'm doing a Command C for copy to put it into the clipboard. Then I can come back over here, and then over here where the ease in and ease out information is here, if I wanted to change it to something else, I would just select this and paste that information that I caught. I'm not going to use it. You can experiment with that on your own. Okay, so remember, if it's set to null, it goes to the default value or to whatever the current movie clip is set at. And that's what happens over here in the CreateJS function. So this is it right in here. All the magic happens here. So first thing that it does is it cycles through everything and it gets it back to the default position. And then after it's done with everything in the default position, then it isolates the one that you selected and it sets it to a play view, so it's active, so that everything is 100% visibility. And here you can see that the visibilities are being set to 0, or in this case it's set to 1.3. That's the background. And over here the visibilities are being set to 100%, and that's the second number. The first number that you see here, that's the delay, but this number is the visibility, 100. The alpha on that is being set. So this turns on what you need when you clicked on it. And this happens when you click on another button, not the same button, on another button. If you happen to click on the same button, then this one runs. And this is the one that sets the alpha here, which if you remember is the alpha 0. This is what sets the arrow so it turns off. So if I leave this at 1, you'll see that now the arrow is not going to disappear when I click on this side. So in here, this all looks great. This works the way it's supposed to. But now if I click on Chicago again, the arrow stays there. So by bringing in this option over here, by turning the arrow back to 0, that's what allows me to click on Chicago, and then click on Chicago again, and then everything disappears. So that's just the way it's being funneled through the CreateJS. So in here I give us a brief little explanation. So here's the CreateJS application, and I'll make another movie, and I'll bring in another movie clip, and I'll just show you how to create one from scratch and how to put it in here relative to what you want to have it do. And then way down here on the bottom is the original arrow rotation that I generated before from the last example. But in this one, the only difference over here is that I'm subtracting 180 degrees. If I wasn't doing that, let me go ahead and delete that. Now you'll see that the arrow is going to go back to pointing from the center. So if I go to New York, it's going to be pointing up that way. If I go to San Diego, it points to the lower direction. Of course, the arrow is getting in the way. Same thing happens if I click on Texas, Austin. It just gets in the way. So in order to flip it around to the other side, I just went ahead, and I'll do an undo here. I just went ahead and gave it a negative 180 degrees to get it back to where it's supposed to be. And I give a little explanation there. And here's the CreateJS link again. So looks like I've got it in 2 places. That was from the original one. And then my little shout out to Wikipedia. That's where I got all the city information from that spot. Okay, so in the next movie, I'm going to create a brand new animation, something completely different, but I'll just show you how to use the CreateJS option.